And I want to remind people that if you use the speaker view, you'll have a better view of each of our participants. So this morning, Victoria and Susan Baker are going to be talking to us, and most of us are familiar with the creative background that they have. Victoria has been a member of the fellowship for many years and has been studying art and painting for more. Susan Baker is a lifelong member and is the author of 9 novels and 2 nonfiction books. All of Susan's books have a legal aspect because of her career in the justice system. A retired Texas judge from Galveston for 12 years, Susan heard everything from murder to divorce. All right, so I can share the screen when Victoria needs it. You'll just have to ask me, Victoria, and the 2 of you may take over the program.
I wished I could say now, hello everybody, van the rest was silence. So you listen what I'm not gonna say. Anyway, I was not born in a vacuum, so I have to tell something about little bit about my background. But Susan and I, when we talked together, found 2 things in common. One was that we both are seekers of what is behind the human endeavors. Why are we doing things? What is going on in our society? And the other is that we are both a product of quite liberal fathers, but not quite. They didn't agree with our ideas to make a living out of those fake ideas. And they forced us out of our artistic endeavors and had to follow a career in the academics, if that is English. Anyway, my father and my parents had 6 daughters and 1 son. That was the last one. We all have a suspicion that the milkman might have done something, but that is a joke. Anyway, my father's daughters had to go follow a career. It's like doctors and lawyers and biologists and anthropologists, so we all came. I was a rebel with a cause. I did not want to go there. I wanted to be an artist. To prove my point, behind the back of my father and mother, I went to the famous Art Academy in Amsterdam, proudful showing all my stuff. And lo and behold, I was accepted. So, triumphantly, I went home. I did it. Yes, said my father. Yes, said my mother. But not yet. I was 16 and a half, 17 years old and out of a very protective family, and I wasn't that rebellious yet. So I gave in. And the closest I came to what I want to study was actually psychology, not to discover myself as such, but to go on in my quest. Who are we? What is behind us? What is in faces? What is in bodies, movements? So I got a master in psychology. I was mad at my father. I said, on my mother's side, we have artists. And one of them I discovered was a decor designer and painter in Hollywood. Yes, said my father, but he's a man. And women have no success in art up till now. Enfin, that was it. I married, and finally I got a chance in my life in France, and we lived there for several years, to go to the famous École des Beaux-Arts. And finally, I was close to heaven. I was learning the trade I was born to, I thought. Okay, this is a little introduction in my background. As a psychologist, that permeated, of course, my thinking, my art. And it helped me a lot in doing painting the faces. What I'm going to say sounds all a kind of hubris type. Are just little pinpricks who are all open for discussion and can all be negated from, well, what you said there, that's not true. I agree or I don't agree. But anyway, it is just to give a background. Mary, if you can go, only put the painting in the back for 1 second. Only the whole one. Yeah, thanks. You can, this is her. I am not talking about uh, if you like it or don't like it. That is not the issue. The issue is the process of how do I came to this painting. I met this woman at a conference. We were in little groups and we were talking about, I do not even know what we're talking about. And I was intrigued by this face and I made little doodles and she discovered that and her eyes became daggers. What are you doing? Immediately I changed my little doodle in lovely little flowers. Anyway, 2 or 3 weeks later came the papers about the conference and the customary groups photo. In the whole group's photo were smiling American women. You know, I don't know how you people are doing that. That is a gift of the gods he bestows on the Americans. You have that wonderful, great smile on every photograph. Europeans are doing it less. We have that kind of smirky smile van okay. And she had no smile at all. It was a stern face, and I was intrigued by it. Okay, that is how it started. Now I have to go to the process an artist goes through. Again, it is just an indication. It is not that every artist goes through, although there are indications that they are. You come in a period of kind of incubation, what is a difficult word? Incubation period, yeah, that's the word. Where you not really make a choice. Things are whirling in your head. You look at the colors, you look at what you doodle, it is, nothing is concrete, nothing is there. You're not gonna do it or you're not going, you don't know. It's just a completely free period of time where something is growing very slowly. And then comes the point that all of a sudden you do it. And I dread that moment so much because I know I will be completely off from the earth. I will not be there. And people call it the flow. And that is what most and all artists do have by my dealings. That immense concentration, what all of a sudden comes up, a concentration of where everything is shut down around you. The world doesn't exist. But in that immense laser focus on what you're gonna do is an experience very difficult to describe. The imagination starts coming in. You're not self-conscious anymore. Your ego falls away. You only have a combination of that what you learned and that what you are and that what you stand for. That is, it comes out of there. I have to look in my thing because I think I'm starting to rambling a little bit. Anyway, that maybe you heard the term, the flow, and that is what we do have. Artists look many times a little bit flighty, a little bit, but that moment is the greatest concentration of, and that everything falls away around you. I'm getting off my script. In that period, there is no worry of failure and self-consciousness disappears. Balancing of challenges and shift. The hand does the work, not the brain. One is not happy or unhappy because that would be a distraction and all distractions fall away. I was one time very mad at my husband when I was in one of those periods because it was around 3 or 4 o'clock at night and a stentorian voice said, "Victoria, you know what time it is?" And oh my God, I woke up and I couldn't get back into it. The revealing things comes afterwards. If you get out of your trance and you have the feeling, it is good. This sounds a little bit like blasphemy. I compare it to Genesis, where God, not in a frenzy, in a flow, I think, created the earth. And he went on and created and was all in it. And the seventh day on Sunday, he stopped, looked around and said, "It is good." And that same feeling you have after you come out of the flow and you look around and you say, "It is good." Not that it is a masterwork or anything, but you did what you had in mind somewhere along the line. Okay, there was this face. And I know I had her. I knew and I discovered why I was intrigued by this face. I used the theory of asymmetry. Someone said, I forgot what, he said, in Eden was symmetry. Actually, it was boring and uneventful. But after Eden, history was made, or history started. Everybody can do a face. I mean, you can learn to draw and you follow the canon rules of a face, eye, nose, mouth, etc. But and now I'm becoming facetious. I think an artist has the eyes who are souls. An artist doesn't look at the outside of things. She doesn't copy, or he, pardon. She looks at the inner workings of a human being. That is what she's looking for, not to copy, not to see what others see. An artist learns to see, but sees. Different, I think, than many other people, because she looks, the artist, looks at the soul of the things. See, I'm getting off my rocker now and I start sprouting all kinds of strange ideas. Okay, we go to her back. Now I have to go to my why did I write things down? Oh yeah, in discovering what I did, I covered at one time the left side and I covered the right side. And I discovered why I was intrigued by this face. One side was petulant, unsatisfied, showing a hard face whose life had not been easy, who had taken blow after blow, disillusions, and cynical. That was one side of the face I had painted. But the other side revealed the beauty about her character. It was serene and calm and innocent with a slight humoristic smirk. It was this side that saved her life and made her caring and gave her happiness. Not every face reveals this duality. This is what I try to find in a face, not because it is ugly or beautiful, but try to save the soul of a person. Drawing a face is easy by just following the rules laid out in the canon of portraiture. But it is only the artist in playing and defying those rules and changing them that defines art, by sensing things while others do not, seeing with the soul of your eye. Ezra Pound said once, artists are the antennas of the race. It's done by perception and feeling, not by reasoning or mere reporting, but what we really see in our imagination, not an imitation or a copy of a face, a continual discovery and astonishment, to draw what I see and feel, not what I know is there. Turner, a great watercolorist, did not draw portholes in a Navy ship, and a Navy officer pointed that out to him. For him, it was not important. I don't know, am I still in my time, or can I add something, or? Yeah, if you can do the half and the half, Mary, please. See, this half is different than the other half. Here she has that smirky sing face, that cynical face. Her lips are turned down. But I don't care. I'm strong. And then, Mary, if you can see the other side. Here, I have the feeling there is a more contemplation in her face, a more, not the hardness is gone. I see it, I hope you see it. But this is the process, what I mean by painting a face, to finding the background. I will add a last thing to it. I was one time in a museum in the Louvre in Paris, and I decided to do the Louvre in one day. Oh my gosh. At the end, I was art blind. I couldn't see any more great heroes on horses and bucolic scenes with fluffy sheep, etc. And all of a sudden, I was drawn in the distance by a painting. Was not very big, as big maybe as the painting I painted myself. There was it was an old lady, old woman. She was not beautiful, full of wrinkles, full of it. But the artist, and it was Rembrandt, had made it. In that face, I saw her life. I saw the children she had, her grandchildren, her pain, her sorrows, her happiness. He had it all in that face. Well, that is art. Thank you.
Okay, Susan.
Okay, I'm not going to repeat what Victoria said. Obviously, writers go through a lot of the same process and have a lot of the same thoughts that Victoria has. But I'm going to talk about books and not screenplays, but fiction and nonfiction books. When you decide to write something, you have to have you have to give some thought into what you want to write. Excuse me, it's hard for me to see from here. What you want to write and why. You want to write fiction or nonfiction. A lot of people think that nonfiction has no creativity to it, but actually there are a lot of decisions you have to make behind writing your nonfiction piece, whether it's an essay, an article, or a book like my collection of stories about murdered judges. The main thing you have to do when you're writing nonfiction is decide whether you're going to write it objectively or subjectively. In that book, I decided I would write it completely objectively and not make any comments about each situation. For example, I could have said about this one judge that he deserved it, although I would never say that. But I let the reader draw their own conclusion. But one of the things you do creatively in nonfiction is you decide also how it's going to be arranged. And I had an author that some of you probably know, his name I won't mention, that said I should just write a book about one judge and go from there. But I had a purpose behind doing a collection of judges who were murdered. And one of those was to get security at our local courthouse, of which we had none. And so I wanted to write what I wanted to write, regardless of whether it ever got published or not. And that's what I did. In my divorce book, it's very subjective. I tell a lot of stories. I make a lot of comments about things. I had a really good time with it. I could have written just very boring, straightforward things about getting a divorce. And in fact, around the time that little book came out, all of these big publishers came out with divorce with dummies and things like that. And if people wanted to fight to the death over in their cases, you know, they could choose those books, or they could choose my little book, and some of them did, and see how the realities of the situation actually are. So that's all I'm going to say about nonfiction. A lot of people want to know, where do you get your ideas? Well, for me, they're everywhere. Lately, I did Can you see that? Yeah. I decided I'm gonna make, can you see it? Oh, anyway, I have a tin with found objects in it. And so I started collecting things that I found. I found one time a piece of paper that says, Joe loves me not, Joe la. So, hey, you know, why was that not finished? I found a funny colored tennis ball. When I was in Las Vegas last year in the ladies' restroom was a band from Money. And I started wondering, did one of the cashiers take a bunch of money into the ladies' room and stick it in their pocket? Why was that there? I used to be a bank teller. That should not have been there. I found an earring in my backyard. Why is there an earring in my backyard? And is there more in my backyard? Like maybe a dead body? I don't know, because I'm not going to dig it up. I found a spoon. Anyway, that's one of the places you can get ideas, is just pick it up off the ground. But I'm not going to lift it up, but I have a big file of ideas. And one of the things that I do is I often look in the obituaries. Can you see that? And one of the reasons I look in obituaries is for names, because you can go online and look up names, but sometimes there are some names that you wouldn't believe in the obituaries, but also people's stories. They're great ideas. I've gone, just see, my first book came out in 1989, and over all those years, I've been to a lot of writers' conference. I went to the Irma Bombeck Writers' Conference one time. Boy, that was so much fun. And I don't really write a humorous column or anything, but I try to be a little humorous in some of my novels. So what I do when I go to conferences is I make notes about things that strike me that I might be able to use later. And on that paper from that, I have humorous judge stories, divorce stand-up. I could do divorce stand-up. I always wanted to do stand-up, but no one ever offered a course. I could mix comedy and tragic divorce stories. So those are just some ideas. I was looking through my file and I found this little piece of paper, and it says, idea, 3 women tenants murdered in the same apartment and consecutively, each separate tenants. 4th wants to find out who did it before she's the, I don't know where that came from. When I was on the bench, I would make lots of notes about cases, and sometimes there were such sad things, but they give me ideas. And here's a letter from somebody. I printed this. I don't know how this works exactly, but this guy, my friend, we used to write letters, and I got an idea out of one of his letters that's like typed 6 or 7 pages long. Anyway, that's just some of the places that I got ideas. But I wanted to talk about where I got the ideas for each of my books. And if you look in the background, I tried to put them all on here, although under my name, I see my 3 Mavis Davis books are covered up by my name, I think. But fiction requires a lot of decision making. You need to decide where you want to end up and what you want the story to be and what story you're going to tell. With so many ideas everywhere, it's a hard decision sometimes to decide what you're going to write. And when I first wrote my first Mavis Davis book, which was actually the first book that was ever published, people said, oh, you really need to write a series. And now I have 3 of them. I'm working on the 4th one, but that was 1989. You know, that's a long time ago. But there were other stories that I wanted to tell. So even though people criticized me and said, you need to quit doing these standalones, you need to write the series, I had stories that I wanted to tell that I told in the standalones. Okay, so in My First Murder, when it first came out in 1989, I was having kind of a hard time when I was married to my first husband, who y'all know, and he's a nice guy and blah, blah, blah. But I started thinking, what would be the reason why somebody like me, who at the time was a fairly successful lawyer, married with 2 kids, want to run away from home? And so one time, I think he was off with the kids camping or something, and I really explored that. And I wrote like a 15-page synopsis, just this idea just jumped in my head, and I wrote. Other times I might outline something. Not everybody does that. A lot of people start writing a book without a synopsis or an outline, and they call it seat of the pants writing. Sometimes they write themselves into a corner, and they have to figure out how to get out of that, kind of like painting yourself into a corner. I'm not really a seat of your pants writer in terms of books or novels, but I am with essays and articles. You can always go back and edit, which when you start writing, a lot of people don't want to do, but I really enjoy editing. So anyway, this woman runs off, and then I have to figure out who's going to find her. And I came up with Mavis Davis, which I thought was kind of funny. I had written a suspense novel and had not been able to get it published. So I was on this critique group. And so I thought, as a lark, I would just write this Mavis Davis novel. And there are some people that had some female mystery writers, actually, one of whom died recently, but I did not kill her. But anyway, she said, "Why are you using such a stupid name like that?" And I was like, okay, we're not friends. So there are a lot of people thought it was kind of a funny Southern sort of thing. In the sequel to that book, I wanted to address false allegations of child abuse because I saw that a lot. I wanted to treat it in such a way that it would make you think about it, but also entertain you with the story of Mavis trying to figure out what happened in this particular case. As you realize by now, I have a very overactive imagination. In the third one, I actually was trying to characterize somebody that I was kind of angry at and make them out to be a caricature of themselves in that book. And I can't remember why I had who killed that captain, or why I has the dead ship's captain in it. But anyway, in my book, Death of a Prince, I covered several interesting things. First, my daddy was a lawyer, and then he was a judge, and he became a judge just as I became a probation officer, which, if you're wondering where I get some of my ideas, I was also a probation officer for a couple of years while I was in law school. And anyway, and I always wondered what it would have been like if I could have practiced law with my daddy, but I couldn't. So I thought about that a whole lot, and I came up with this idea for mother-daughter criminal defense lawyers practicing law in Galveston, and that's where I came up with Death of a Prince. And the basis for the plot originally was that I saw this very famous lawyer pull his associate down the hall by his nose or by his ear. I can't remember which now because I fictionalized it. And I thought, what would have to take place for somebody to really kill this guy? Because clearly he's a real not nice person. And so anyway, that was sort of the germ of that. And recently, now see, I wrote that book a long time ago. It came out. And when I was living in Fredericksburg when it came out, and they told me to go ahead and start on the next one. But then a whole lot of stuff came, and I sat up there and I thought, I'm not really making any money over this. Let me do something else. And then we ended up moving back down here. So I had about half of the sequel to that done. And then a long time ago now, I came up with the idea of finishing the sequel. So that's what came out last December, was Death of a Rancher's Daughter. And part of the way I came up with that idea was when I was living in Fredericksburg, I heard a story about how so many more Hispanic people were dying in the Gillespie County jail than white people. So that was one idea. And I also lived real near the neighborhood of Hispanic people. So I was driving through there all the time, and there hadn't been any Hispanic elected officials at that time. So I had this really good idea about prejudice in the whole country. But I also had to get Irma and Sandra up to the hill country. Well, when I sat as a visiting judge in Bandera one day, a woman judge from Galveston came in there, and I was like, wow, that is really weird. At first I thought it couldn't be her because I'm in Bandera and she's from Galveston. Well, she represented a local rancher. And so in Death of a Rancher's Daughter, Irma has a friend up in the hill country, and she gets hired to defend someone for the murder of one of her twin daughters. So that's how that came about. The Suggestion of Death. Now that was kind of an interesting book. It's my only book from a man's viewpoint. I used to hear child support cases, but now everything's been rearranged. So there's a child support master. And actually I had to rewrite that book several times to sort of keep up with the law. But I used to sit up on the bench and I'd hear all these child non-support cases. And I used to think, and I never admitted this when I was still on the bench, that some of these kids would be better off if their fathers were dead. Because if their fathers were dead, they'd get Social Security and other benefits. Like I said, I never vocalized that. But in my book, actually, the judge does think about that. She doesn't say that. So then I started thinking, what if there was somebody out there murdering fathers who didn't pay their child support? And what if this guy went to court and he kept hearing about these guys who couldn't pay their child support getting killed? And what if he thought maybe he was going to be the next one and he was a laid off investigative reporter? And that's where that comes from. So I had a lot of fun with it, writing from a man's viewpoint. And actually, Mike Hennon, y'all may remember him. He used to be in my writer's group for a little while. One time he contacted me, said, Susan, you know that scene where Jim is looking through the window and he sees his ex-wife and kids sitting at the dinner table with a man sitting at the other end? And I said, yeah. He said, where'd you get that from? And I said, well, I just made it up. I used to represent a lot of men. He said, that happened to me. I don't think he intended that to be necessarily confidential, but he really complimented me because I really was able to get into the man's viewpoint. And I used to put myself in their shoes and think about how would they feel? How would I feel if I was them? In Ledbetter Street, it's the one that's not really a suspense or mystery, but it does have a lot of legal stuff in it. This woman is fighting to get custody of her child that she gave up for adoption many, many years before, that her mother forced her to give up for adoption. And it's sort of based on several things. One, I knew some girls when I was in high school whose parents forced them to give up their babies for adoption. And so I wondered, in what instance could a mother of a child that she gave up ever get custody of that child again? The other thing was that I'd had a case involving an autistic boy. He came into the courtroom and he was functional, but he really couldn't communicate very well. Anyway, he walked all over my courtroom. He went to my chambers. It was just so interesting. And I thought, well, okay, maybe in the case of a disabled child, they could get custody of him back. So in that book, the person that the mother wants to get back is autistic, but he's actually grown by then. And so that was sort of the kernel of that. And Unaware, which is a suspense novel, I actually had a case involving a guy who worked on the wharves. I represented his wife, and she was just a gorgeous, young, blonde-headed girl. And he threatened to tear her guts out with his cotton knife. And he actually had told her some threats against me. So I thought, okay, I'm going to write this book about this guy who's actually stalking the lawyer. And so that's where that came from. And in my book, or maybe it was a cotton hook. And yeah, I fictionalized this stuff and I can't remember what really happens. But I also wanted to include some things in there about marital relationships and people with kids and stuff. So all that stuff is tied in. Let's see. Actually, that guy's dead now. Somebody killed him in a fight on the wharves, but that's another story. Texas Style Justice, which was the book about a woman judge who wanted to be on the U.S. Supreme Court, was is kind of based on, I'm checking my time here. If you pay any attention to Texas politics, you see that law firms contribute huge amounts of money to candidates for office, and particularly to judicial candidates. And I can remember one of the first years that I was on the bench, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court had some hearings, and I actually testified and told him I didn't think anybody should get more than $500 from anybody, but people give thousands and thousands of dollars. So that was sort of the kernel for that book, was what if this woman had all these ambitions and she found out that she had to do some things that maybe she never thought she would have to do in order to reach her goals. And then there's other things in there about abortion and marital problems and stuff like that. So it's all in the imagination. And I've got this imagination that's gotten me in trouble before. It was really hard sometimes on the bench to pay attention to some of these really boring cases, but it dates back to even in junior high. I used to get check marks on my report card because I'd be daydreaming instead of paying attention in class. But really, if you just sit down and you've got any kind of imagination at all and just start thinking about it, hey, it can go anywhere. Anything can go anywhere, and don't limit yourself. I used to tell people that anybody can write if I could write, and that's not necessarily true. Not everybody is me, but everybody has something in them that is creative if they will just look inside and decide that they want to explore that. And sometimes it's really hard because you don't want to admit that maybe if you'd explored it earlier, you wouldn't have wasted so much time or whatever. But I just want to say that look in the mirror and think about this and explore your creativity. What else do you have to do? We're still going to be mostly locked down for the rest of the year. And if you have any questions about it, call me and I'll help you with it, whether books or whatever. And I'm sure Victoria could give you some ideas too. And I know I've talked really fast and I'm out of time. So that's it. Goodbye.
Thank you, Susan and Victoria. It sounds like both of you have more to say, and maybe we'll find another
Yeah.
opportunity to continue this.